The morning sun cast long shadows across the abandoned shipyard as Marcus Thompson walked slowly between the rusted hulks of forgotten vessels. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he pulled his thin jacket tighter against the cold October wind. At 68, the former Navy machinist had become just another invisible face in the crowd of homeless veterans who gathered each day at the downtown mission. Marcus had once been somebody important. 25 years of service in the United States Navy, with tours that took him from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea. He could rebuild an engine blindfolded, fix electrical systems that stumped younger engineers, and had earned 3 commendations for his technical innovations that saved both time and money for the fleet. But that was before the budget cuts, before his position was eliminated, before his wife left him, and before the drinking started. Now he spent his days collecting aluminum cans and his nights in whatever shelter had an open bed. His military pension barely covered a weekly motel room when he was lucky, and most nights he slept under bridges or in abandoned buildings. The other homeless men respected him for his service, but to the rest of the world, Marcus Thompson had simply disappeared. The Navy base where he once worked had changed dramatically since his retirement. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez had taken command of Naval Systems Command just 6 months earlier, and she was facing the biggest crisis in the department's history. The fleet's aging propulsion systems were failing at an alarming rate, causing ships to break down in the middle of critical missions. 3 destroyers had been stranded in international waters in the past month alone, creating diplomatic incidents and putting American sailors at risk. The Admiral sat in her office, surrounded by stacks of technical reports and frustrated engineering teams. Every contractor they brought in charged millions for repairs that lasted only months. The younger engineers, despite their advanced degrees, seemed to lack the practical experience needed to solve problems that required both technical knowledge and hands-on intuition. The Navy was hemorrhaging money while its operational readiness plummeted. "We need someone who understands these older systems inside and out," Admiral Rodriguez told her Chief of Staff, Captain Williams. "These new graduates know theory, but they've never actually worked with their hands on equipment that's been running for 30 years. Meanwhile, Marcus was having another bad day. He had been turned away from 2 job interviews that week, with employers barely looking at his resume once they saw his current address listed as General Delivery. His military service seemed to count for nothing in a world that valued college degrees over practical experience. The irony wasn't lost on him that the same systems he had maintained and improved for decades were now causing problems that no one could solve. That evening, as Marcus sat outside the mission waiting for dinner to be served, he overheard 2 younger veterans talking about their struggles to find work. One had been an electronics specialist, the other a diesel mechanic, both with multiple deployments and solid service records. Like Marcus, they had found that their military experience translated poorly to civilian job requirements. "It's like everything we learned doesn't matter anymore," the electronics specialist was saying. "They want certifications for equipment that didn't even exist when we were in." Marcus nodded knowingly. He had encountered the same problem repeatedly. Employers wanted workers who were certified on the latest computer-controlled systems, not someone who could diagnose problems by listening to engine sounds or feeling vibrations through metal. The institutional knowledge that came from years of hands-on experience was being discarded in favor of fresh graduates who could operate new software but had never solved a real crisis under pressure. The situation at Naval Systems Command was becoming desperate. Admiral Rodriguez had called in experts from every major defense contractor, but none of their solutions were working. The problems were too complex and interconnected, requiring someone who understood not just individual components, but how all the systems worked together after decades of modifications and repairs. During one particularly frustrating meeting, an older civilian contractor mentioned that the Navy used to have machinists and engineers who could fix anything. "There was this guy, Thompson, I think, who could diagnose problems that stumped everyone else," he said. But I heard he retired years ago and kind of disappeared. Admiral Rodriguez made a note of the name. She had learned during her own rise through the ranks that sometimes the best solutions came from unexpected sources. While her staff continued working through official channels, she decided to do some investigating on her own. A few phone calls to retired officers revealed that Marcus Thompson had indeed been legendary for his problem-solving abilities, but no one seemed to know what had happened to him after retirement. The breakthrough came when Admiral Rodriguez contacted the local Veterans Affairs office. After explaining the situation, a counselor mentioned that they had several homeless veterans with technical backgrounds who had struggled to find employment. The counselor couldn't give out specific information, but suggested that the Admiral might want to visit some of the local shelters and missions where former military personnel often gathered. It was an unusual approach for a high-ranking officer, but Admiral Rodriguez had built her career on unconventional thinking. She decided that if there was even a small chance of finding someone who could help solve the crisis, it was worth investigating. The next morning, she put on civilian clothes and drove to the first shelter on her list. Marcus was fixing a broken washing machine at the mission when Admiral Rodriguez walked in. She had asked to speak with any former Navy personnel who had technical experience, and the staff had pointed her toward the laundry room where Marcus was working. As she watched him work, she was struck by the methodical way he approached the problem, testing different components until he found the exact cause of the malfunction. "Excuse me," she said, walking over to where Marcus was elbow-deep in the washing machine's mechanical components. "I'm looking for former Navy personnel who might be able to help with a technical problem." Marcus looked up, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing something military in the woman's bearing despite her civilian clothes. "Depends on the problem," he said simply, wiping his hands on an old rag. Admiral Rodriguez introduced herself, though she didn't initially reveal her rank. She explained that the Navy was having serious technical difficulties with older propulsion systems and needed someone with extensive hands-on experience. As she described the problems, she watched Marcus's expression change from polite interest to focused attention. "Those sound like the same integration issues we were starting to see when I retired," Marcus said thoughtfully. "The newer control systems don't always play nice with the older mechanical components. You get feedback loops and timing problems that don't show up in computer simulations." The Admiral was impressed by Marcus's immediate grasp of the situation. This was exactly the kind of insight that had been missing from all the contractor reports. She decided to take a calculated risk and reveal who she really was. When Marcus learned he was talking to Admiral Rodriguez, his first instinct was to apologize for his appearance and situation, but the Admiral cut him off. "I don't care about any of that," she said firmly. "I care about whether you can help us solve a problem that's putting American sailors at risk." The conversation continued for another hour, with Marcus asking detailed technical questions that demonstrated a deep understanding of naval systems. Admiral Rodriguez became increasingly convinced that she had found exactly what she was looking for, but she knew that bringing a homeless veteran into a high-security naval facility would require careful handling. Admiral Rodriguez knew that bringing Marcus Thompson back into the Navy would face enormous bureaucratic resistance. His security clearance had expired, he had no permanent address, and his appearance hardly fit the image of a defense contractor. But as she drove back to the base, she kept thinking about the questions he had asked and the insights he had shared. This man understood the fleet's problems better than teams of highly paid consultants. The first step was getting Marcus cleaned up and properly equipped. Admiral Rodriguez arranged for him to receive temporary housing in base guest quarters, along with a clothing allowance and access to base facilities. She also assigned Captain Williams to expedite the security clearance renewal, though she knew it would take weeks to complete. Marcus was overwhelmed by the sudden change in his circumstances. After years of struggling just to find a warm place to sleep, he now had a clean room, regular meals, and people treating him with respect. But he was also nervous about whether his skills would still be relevant after so many years away from active duty. "I need to see the actual equipment," Marcus told Admiral Rodriguez during their second meeting. "I can't diagnose problems from reports and computer models. These systems are like living things. You have to listen to them, feel how they respond." The Admiral arranged for Marcus to visit the USS Portland, one of the ships currently experiencing propulsion problems. As they walked through the engine room, Marcus's years of experience immediately showed. While the ship's current engineers focused on computer readouts and diagnostic codes, Marcus went straight to the source of the problems. "This bearing housing is vibrating wrong," he said, placing his hand on a component that looked perfectly normal to everyone else. "The frequency is off by just enough to throw the timing out of sync with the fuel injection system." The ship's chief engineer, a young lieutenant with an engineering degree from MIT, looked skeptical. "All our diagnostics show that bearing is within normal parameters," he said. Marcus smiled patiently. "Your computers are measuring what they're programmed to measure. But they can't feel what I can feel, or hear what I'm hearing. This bearing has maybe 2 weeks before it fails completely. And when it does, it'll take out the entire propulsion control system." To prove his point, Marcus asked for some basic tools. Within an hour, he had traced the problem through 3 interconnected systems, showing how a slightly worn bearing was causing a cascade of timing issues that affected everything from fuel efficiency to navigation control. The computer diagnostics had been treating each symptom as a separate problem, missing the underlying cause entirely. The success on the Portland led to more opportunities. Admiral Rodriguez quietly arranged for Marcus to examine other problematic ships, and in each case, he identified issues that had stumped the regular maintenance crews. His ability to understand how aging systems interacted with newer upgrades was exactly what the Navy needed. However, not everyone was happy about Marcus's involvement. Some officers resented the idea that a homeless veteran could solve problems that had challenged their best engineers. Defense contractors were particularly resistant, as Marcus's solutions often involved simple repairs rather than expensive replacements. During one heated meeting, a contractor representative argued that Marcus's methods were outdated and potentially dangerous. "We need modern solutions, not quick fixes from someone who's been out of the loop for years," the contractor said. Admiral Rodriguez had heard enough. "Mr. Thompson's quick fixes have solved more problems in 2 weeks than your company has addressed in 6 months," she replied. "And his solutions cost thousands of dollars instead of millions." The real test came when the USS Mississippi suffered a complete propulsion failure while on patrol in the South China Sea. The ship was dead in the water, unable to maneuver, while tensions with Chinese naval forces were running high. Every minute the ship remained disabled increased the risk of an international incident. The Mississippi's engineering team had exhausted all standard troubleshooting procedures. They had consulted with experts via satellite communication, but no one could identify the problem. The ship would need to be towed to port for extensive repairs, a process that could take weeks and would remove a critical asset from the fleet during a sensitive period. Admiral Rodriguez made the decision to send Marcus to the Mississippi aboard a Navy transport aircraft. It was an unprecedented move, sending a recently homeless veteran to solve a crisis that had stumped the Navy's best minds. But she had seen his results, and she trusted his abilities more than any computer analysis. When Marcus arrived on the Mississippi, he was greeted with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism from the crew. The ship's captain, Commander Jackson, was desperate enough to try anything, but many of the younger officers questioned whether this elderly civilian could really help. Marcus began his examination in the engine room, working methodically through the ship's systems. Unlike the frantic troubleshooting that had been going on for hours, he moved calmly and deliberately, using his hands and ears as much as any instruments. After 2 hours of investigation, Marcus called the captain to the engine room. "The problem isn't mechanical," he announced. "It's in the software interface between the old hydraulic controls and the new digital systems. Someone uploaded a routine maintenance update last week, but the update wasn't compatible with the hydraulic response timing on this particular ship configuration." The explanation made perfect sense once Marcus laid it out. But it would never have been discovered through normal diagnostic procedures. The computer systems all showed normal operation because they were responding correctly to the commands they were receiving. The problem was that those commands weren't properly coordinated with the physical systems they controlled. Marcus's solution was elegantly simple. By adjusting a few timing parameters in the interface software and recalibrating the hydraulic response sensors, he restored full propulsion capability within 4 hours of his arrival. The Mississippi was able to resume its patrol mission, and the potential international incident was avoided. News of Marcus's success spread quickly through the Navy's command structure. Admiral Rodriguez found herself fielding calls from other commanders who wanted to borrow her miracle worker for their own technical problems. But she also faced pressure from some quarters to formalize Marcus's role within the official defense establishment. The Pentagon sent a team to evaluate Marcus's contributions and determine how his expertise could be integrated into standard Navy operations. The team included procurement specialists, security officers, and technical evaluators, all focused on turning Marcus's unique skills into a reproducible process. Marcus found the evaluation process frustrating. The Pentagon team wanted him to document his diagnostic methods and create step-by-step procedures that other technicians could follow. But much of what Marcus did relied on years of accumulated experience and intuitive understanding that couldn't be easily written down. "You're asking me to explain how I know what I know," Marcus told Admiral Rodriguez after a particularly difficult session with the evaluation team. "It's like asking a master chef to write down exactly how much salt to add without tasting the food. Some things you learn by doing, not by reading." Admiral Rodriguez understood the dilemma. The Navy's bureaucracy was designed to create standardized procedures and reproducible results. But Marcus's value lay precisely in his ability to see patterns and connections that couldn't be reduced to a checklist. The solution came from an unexpected source. Captain Williams, Admiral Rodriguez's chief of staff, suggested creating a new position that would allow Marcus to work directly under the Admiral's authority, bypassing normal contractor and civil service procedures. The position would be classified as a special technical consultant, with Marcus reporting directly to Naval Systems Command. The arrangement faced resistance from both bureaucrats who wanted Marcus to go through normal hiring channels and contractors who saw him as a threat to their business. But Admiral Rodriguez had the support of the Chief of Naval Operations, who had seen the dramatic improvement in fleet readiness since Marcus began his work. Marcus accepted the position, though he remained somewhat uncomfortable with the attention and formality that came with it. He preferred working directly with ships and equipment rather than attending meetings and writing reports. But he understood that his new role would allow him to have a broader impact on fleet operations. The transformation in Marcus's life was remarkable. In just a few months, he had gone from sleeping under bridges to being one of the Navy's most valuable technical resources. But the change wasn't just personal. His work was beginning to reshape how the Navy approached maintenance and problem-solving across the entire fleet. Within 6 months of Marcus Thompson's return to Navy service, fleet readiness had improved by 40%. Ships that had been plagued by recurring mechanical problems were operating smoothly, and the cost of maintenance had dropped dramatically. But Marcus's greatest contribution wasn't just solving individual problems. It was changing how the Navy thought about technical expertise. Admiral Rodriguez realized that Marcus represented something the military had lost in its push toward modernization: institutional knowledge. The Navy had focused so heavily on recruiting new graduates with the latest technical training that it had forgotten the value of experienced hands who understood how complex systems actually worked in practice. Marcus began developing a training program that paired young engineers with experienced veterans who had hands-on knowledge of older systems. The program wasn't about replacing modern education with old-school methods, but about combining both approaches to create more effective problem solvers. "These kids know more theory than I ever did," Marcus explained to a group of senior officers. "But they've never seen what happens when theory meets reality in the middle of the ocean. When you combine their knowledge with practical experience, you get engineers who can handle anything." The training program faced initial resistance from some quarters. Young officers worried that they would be held back by outdated methods, while some veteran instructors questioned whether their knowledge was really valuable in an age of computer-controlled systems. But the results spoke for themselves. Engineers who completed Marcus's training program showed dramatically improved diagnostic abilities. They learned to use their senses as well as instruments to understand how different systems interacted and to think creatively about solutions rather than just following troubleshooting manuals. The program's success attracted attention from other branches of the military and even civilian industries. Companies that operated complex machinery began requesting similar training for their technicians. Marcus found himself traveling around the country, sharing his knowledge with everyone from airline mechanics to nuclear power plant operators. But Marcus's most significant impact came through his work with homeless veterans. Having experienced homelessness himself, he understood the barriers that prevented skilled former military personnel from finding employment. He worked with Admiral Rodriguez to create a program that identified homeless veterans with technical skills and provided them with opportunities to contribute their expertise. The Veterans Technical Corps, as it became known, placed homeless veterans in temporary consulting roles with defense contractors and military maintenance facilities. The program provided housing, training updates, and support services while giving these forgotten experts a chance to prove their value. The first group of Veterans Technical Corps participants included an Air Force electronics specialist who had been living in his car, a Marine diesel mechanic who had been sleeping in homeless shelters, and a Navy radar technician who had been struggling with addiction after losing his civilian job. All three had extensive military experience, but had been unable to translate their skills into stable civilian employment. Under Marcus's guidance, these veterans began working on problems that had stumped regular maintenance teams. Their success rate was remarkable, and their cost-effectiveness compared to traditional contractors was even more impressive. More importantly, the program gave these forgotten heroes a chance to rebuild their lives and contribute to national security once again. The Veterans Technical Corps expanded rapidly as word spread about its effectiveness. Other military bases began requesting teams of veteran consultants to help with their most challenging technical problems. Defense contractors started hiring program graduates as permanent employees, recognizing that their combination of practical experience and dedication made them valuable assets. Marcus also worked to address the systemic issues that had led to his own homelessness. He testified before Congress about the need for better transition services for retiring military personnel, particularly those with technical specialties. He advocated for programs that would help veterans translate their military experience into civilian qualifications. His congressional testimony was powerful and personal. "I spent 25 years serving my country, learning skills that are desperately needed today," he told the assembled representatives. "But when I retired, I was treated like those skills were worthless. No one should have to sleep under bridges just because their expertise doesn't fit neatly into a computer database." The testimony led to new legislation expanding veteran transition services and creating pathways for experienced military personnel to work as government contractors without going through lengthy certification processes. The law also established funding for programs like the Veterans Technical Corps in other regions of the country. Marcus's personal transformation continued as well. He moved into a comfortable apartment near the naval base and rekindled relationships with family members who had lost touch with him during his homeless years. His daughter, who hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, reached out after seeing news coverage of his work with the Navy. The reunion was emotional and difficult, but it marked the beginning of Marcus rebuilding the personal relationships that had been damaged by his struggles. He was honest about his mistakes and the drinking problem that had contributed to his downfall, but he was also able to show that he had overcome those challenges and was making a positive contribution again. Admiral Rodriguez became a close friend and advocate, recognizing that Marcus's story represented broader issues within the military and veteran community. She worked with him to document the lessons learned from his experience and to ensure that similar expertise wouldn't be lost in the future. Together, they developed new policies for retaining institutional knowledge as experienced personnel retired. The policies included mentorship programs, knowledge transfer initiatives, and consulting arrangements that kept retired experts connected to active duty operations. The impact of these changes extended far beyond individual ships or specific technical problems. The Navy's approach to maintenance and problem-solving became more flexible and effective, combining cutting-edge technology with hard-won experience. Fleet readiness continued to improve, while costs decreased and sailor safety increased. Marcus also became a sought-after speaker at military academies and engineering schools, sharing his story and advocating for the value of practical experience alongside academic knowledge. His message resonated with audiences who had seen how over-reliance on theoretical knowledge could miss important real-world considerations. 3 years after Admiral Rodriguez first found him fixing a washing machine at a homeless mission, Marcus was recognized with the Navy's highest civilian honor for his contributions to fleet operations and veteran welfare. The ceremony was attended by senior military officials, members of Congress, and dozens of veterans whose lives had been changed by the programs he had helped create. In his acceptance speech, Marcus spoke about the transformation that was possible when society recognized and valued the contributions of all its citizens, regardless of their circumstances. "Every person has something valuable to offer," he said. "Sometimes we just need someone willing to look past appearances and give us a chance to prove our worth." The speech was carried live on military television networks and shared widely on social media. It became a rallying cry for organizations working to help homeless veterans and for military leaders seeking to retain experienced personnel. Marcus's story also inspired changes in how civilian employers viewed veteran job applicants. Companies began recognizing that military experience, even from older service members, represented valuable skills that couldn't be easily replaced. Hiring programs specifically targeted veterans with practical experience, and many companies found that these employees brought problem-solving abilities and work ethics that significantly improved their operations. Today, Marcus continues his work with Naval Systems Command while overseeing the Veterans Technical Corps program. The fleet operates more efficiently than it has in decades, and hundreds of formerly homeless veterans have found new purpose and stability through the programs he helped create. His story has become legendary within military circles, but Marcus remains focused on practical results rather than personal recognition. He still prefers working with his hands to attending ceremonies, and he still believes that the most important measure of success is whether ships can complete their missions safely and effectively. The transformation that began with one admiral's willingness to look for solutions in unexpected places has reshaped how the military values experience and how society treats its veterans. Marcus Thompson's journey from homeless veteran to essential expert proves that sometimes the most valuable resources are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize their worth.